Today's investigation comes from a collaboration between the BBC and the Royal Society, who say,
How did a girl who grew up in rural Scotland in the 1780s become the first person to be described as a scientist? Mary Somerville, first published in 1834, Somerville's landmark book on the connection of the physical sciences wove together astronomy, physics, and mathematics. It was a review of this book where the word scientist was first used. The reviewer felt that the commonly used term man of science was inappropriate to describe Somerville. Firstly, because she wasn't a man, and secondly, because she was able to synthesize separate fields into a single discipline.
I have a confession to make. I might be the one responsible for this misconception. You see, I've been a researcher for a very long time. I've done books, movies, more podcasts than I care to count, and about 10 years ago I was tasked with doing an article on 10 women in STEM you might not have heard of. I don't know, something like that. And one of the facts I gave was about Mary Somerville, who is fascinating. And as part of the facts I gave about her, I said that the first appearance of the word scientist in the Oxford English Dictionary was a review of her book. And then some amount of time later, I start seeing a viral Tumblr post, which you'd be amazed at how many of your favorite YouTubers cite much of their information from viral Tumblr posts that was saying basically what was said in this video. That post is where they got the information. I don't know if people misunderstood what I said because just the timing was very coincidental, which taught me a lot. I don't know if I am actually responsible. I've not gone back and looked, but it taught me that. So when James Cameron, I promise this is going to be relevant, when he won a lot of Oscars for Titanic, during one of his acceptance speeches, he went up and said, "I'm king of the world." And that became controversial because people were like, wow, okay, you just won all these Oscars, you have the biggest movie ever, and now you're saying I'm king of the world? And he responded that that's not what he meant. He meant just like, hey, mom and dad, I'm feeling amazing right now. But he owned it because part of the art of being a director is knowing how your phrases will land, and he misjudged how that phrase will land. So that really taught me that as a researcher, you need to be careful not only that your facts are correct, but also that how people interpret your facts are correct. So this is part of my effort to correct my terrible mistake. So the man in question who did the review, William Whewell, he does not coin the word to describe Somerville. And actually, he makes it clear that the word scientist had been coined at some point earlier. He's just now writing it down. He starts off the relevant part of the review by saying, should have done this better. There we go. We must recollect that her professed object is to illustrate the connection of the physical sciences. This is a noble object, and to succeed in it would be to render a most important service to science. Then he goes on that science in his time is characterized by a problem. The age of the polymath is dying. It used to be that to know anything or be considered learned, you had to know philology, mathematics, all the subjects of human knowledge. But in his era, the mathematician turns away from the chemist from the naturalist. The mathematician, left to himself, divides himself into a pure mathematician and a mixed mathematician who soon part company. The chemist is perhaps a chemist of electrochemistry. If so, he leaves common chemical analysis to others. The splitting of the field is evident in that there's simply no term to designate the students of the knowledge of the material world collectively. An issue that Whewell says came up at a meeting of the British Association for the Advancement of Science, where there was no general term by which these gentlemen could describe themselves. Philosophers? Too lofty. Savants? Too assuming. Some English translation of the German Naturforscher. The candidates, Nature Peeper and Nature Poker, were too silly. But some ingenious gentlemen, universally assumed to be Whewell himself, proposed that, by analogy with artist, they might form scientist. And everybody hated it. The term scientist has a history after that point, but that's not a subject for here. The point is, he says that when the term was first used was before the review of this book. This is just when it enters print in a major way. Then after all that, he says, "The inconveniences of this division of the soil of science into infinitely small allotments have been felt and complained of. It was one object, we believe, of the British Association to remedy these inconveniences by bringing together the cultivators of different departments. To remove the evil in another way is one subject of Miss Somerville's work." And after well over a page of diversion, we're back to actually reviewing Somerville's book. But that's the context. He approves of how it's a book about the connectivity of the sciences, and then he rants about how the sciences should be held closer together. It's in no way coined for her. I think a big part of the problem is that in this day and age, we think of book reviews as fundamentally being reviews of books, but it's never been peculiar for them to go on long tangents about the nature of reality or some other subject the reviewer finds interesting. And that's what Whewell seems to be doing. The book is on a topic that he finds important, so he uses the book review as a springboard to talk about the importance of connections in sciences. But since it's in a book review, people naturally overassume connections to the book. The point of the core fact really should be, and if I am truly responsible for this misconception how I meant it, is placing an absolutely fascinating and deeply important science popularizer squarely into the broader conversations around science that was taking place at the time. Because it's not to take away from her importance to say the scientist fact is a misunderstanding. It's because she doesn't need it to be interesting. But that's a future video.